Good afternoon, and welcome to the Music and Technology Seminar at Carnegie Mellon. Our guest today is Fritz Myers, and I hope you don't mind a short reflection on our shared experience in this very space, dating back to New Year's Day 2001, the day the keys to the recording studio at Carnegie Mellon were turned over to me. Fritz and I spent New Year's Day and the next few days finding the light switches, figuring out the patch bays, the new digital mixer, and all the other gear and equipment. The studio was Fritz's dream come true, and to be clear, mine too. Finally, the School of Music had a recording studio. Fritz was here honing his recording, editing, and mastering skills day and night until he graduated and built a life that encompassed music and technology. In August of 2014, a plaque was placed on the door of the recording studio that reads, "Realizing Dreams with Music and Technology Through the Generosity of Nick and Kimmy Vlahakis." This message certainly applies retroactively to our seminar guest today. Please welcome Fritz Myers to the Music and Technology Seminar.
Thank you, Ricardo. I do want to say before I get going that Ricardo had an enormous impact on just the opportunities that were available to me as an undergrad. So thank you, Ricardo. So I'm just going to share my screen. All right. Very happy to be here with you guys today. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or make a note, and we can dive into anything more deeply during the Q&A period of this. So a quick word on the title of my lecture. The blunt feedback that I got was, I don't know what the Anthropocene is. So quickly, it's a term popularized by the scientist Paul Crutzen that denotes the period during which human activity has been the dominant influence on climate and the environment, beginning at the start of the Industrial Revolution. So in thinking about music and technology, it occurred to me that music, like climate and every other part of human experience, has been changed or recontextualized by the technological advancements of the last 250 years. In our time, there is a lot of anxiety about the disruption of the music business, but looking back as far as, the classical period, these technological advances were upending how musicians and artists made their living. So I'm going to walk you through the four phases of my career from Carnegie Mellon to Los Angeles, my New York grad school experience, my current work, and some additional thoughts on music and technologies and some principles that helped me in my career. For each of these phases, I want to share some things that were happening around that time in the recorded music business, just to contextualize what was happening and to give you all an idea of, where we are technologically in that sort of moment. So 1999 to 2001, I'm starting as an undergrad at Carnegie Mellon. Pro Tools LE is released, which was a huge step forward. It didn't require proprietary PCI, core audio, or DSP cards. eMagic releases Logic 4. This is pre-Apple. The Recording Industry Association of America, IRAA, that's going to come up a bunch of times in my talk, reports 14.6 billion in revenue in 1999. This is an all-time high and based on 100% physical sales. Napster is launched. Apple introduces the iTunes Media Player and the iPod, and finally, Ableton Live 1 is released. So, Carnegie Mellon. I love this quote. This is an English proverb. My research led me to it being quoted in the Times of London in 1927. Why do I love this quote? I love it because it expresses something that I feel like we as creatives and as artists are constantly grappling with. A lot of what we do is the realization of an idea, and ideally the realization of an idea that is new, that people don't necessarily understand. So I won't try and explain it any further because that would probably ruin it, but just as a vibe, as an idea to contextualize the beginning of my career at Carnegie Mellon. So in the first week of September 1999, I moved into this building, Hammerschlag Dorm. And that same week, the Backstreet Boys sold 1.1 million CDs. And the first thing that I did when I moved into my dorm was download Napster. which for those of you who aren't familiar, that is the first peer-to-peer music sharing service to really get widespread use. This also was without any licensing and would go on to completely decimate the music industry within 2 years. Um, so my first semester at Carnegie Mellon, I studied composition with Nancy Galbraith. I did well in my classes. I loved studying with Nancy. I was learning kind of all of the creative things that I wanted to, but I don't come from a background of artists. My family, while they were supportive, they were all, the question that I constantly got was, how will you make a living? So I did what any sort of slightly insecure undergrad would do. During winter break, I decided that I was going to drop out, which I did. And I took a string of increasingly unfulfilling jobs. But at the same time, I spent a lot of time writing songs and experimenting with rudimentary recording technologies on a 4-track DAW called Cakewalk. Um, After about 8 months of this, I decided to go back to Carnegie Mellon because anything that I was doing at CMU was more fulfilling than working these kind of dead end temp jobs that I was doing. When I returned to CMU, I took a part time job to help make ends meet at Radio Shack. Um, so once I was back at CMU, I looked into recording services because I wanted to learn more just about recording. I wanted to, make recording part of my education. So naturally, that led me to Ricardo, who immediately welcomed me and arranged to have me trained up so that I could start recording concerts. He taught me the basics of mic placement, all of those sorts of things. Um, Later that semester, while I was working at Radio Shack, I recognized Liz Berlin of the Pittsburgh band Rusted Root. And when I was ringing her up, I blurted out something like, "Hey, I think your band is great. And if you guys ever need any help with anything, I'm a recording engineer," which was mostly true. I was willing to help them. I'm not sure that I really could have been categorized as a recording engineer at that point, but I was very enthusiastic, and she very graciously invited me to come to the band's loft in the Hill District the next night because they were in the beginning phases of making a record. So I met the band, and they, interviewed me to whatever degree you want to call it an interview. They basically made sure that I wasn't like a weirdo super fan psycho or whatever. And I was smart enough to find the studio, which means that I was qualified to be an assistant or a runner or, just sort of an extra pair of hands while they were in pre-production for things. Um, so working for the band ended up filling 3 semesters of independent studies for me. I immediately went to Ricardo, and to his credit, his response when I pitched him, this independent study was, "That's great, you should do it, but I'm going to come to the studio and I'm going to make sure that there's actually something for you to learn," which he did. So once all of that was sorted, I spent, I guess, about 2 years working with the band. A few months into working with them, Bill Bottrell came on to produce the record. So Bill is an incredible engineer, mixer, Grammy winner, yada, 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 all of those kind of things. His credits include Michael Jackson's Dangerous, Tom Petty's Full Moon Fever, Sheryl Crow's Tuesday Night Music Club. And for those of you who don't really have any connection to those names, those are all exquisitely made records that were extraordinarily commercially successful. So Bill was my first exposure to what I would call record production. Um, it was a huge impact on me because it was the first time that I saw someone making choices about microphones and compression and EQ and what space we were putting instruments in and how we were recording them to elevate whatever material the band was recording. Um, it was something that, I mean, there are things that I learned under Bill that to this day I still use, that I still, reference, that, any of his mixes are the kinds of things that I will throw on from time to time and just be like, "Oh, okay, this is what amazing sounds like." So the rest of my career at Carnegie Mellon was split between composing, performing, classes, and as Ricardo alluded to, once the studio opened and I received keys as the TA, making records with friends and colleagues after hours. Um, my classmate Brian Senti and I spent, I think that we made like 2 or 3 full records while we were undergrads, just kind of in the middle of the night. We recruited people, and Brian remains a dear friend to this day, who's also had a remarkable career in film and television. If you don't know his music, look it up. He has a new single out called La Mera. It's beautiful. Give it a listen. All right, so that brings us to 2003, 2004. This is around the time that I am graduating from Carnegie Mellon, my senior year. So things that happened in 2003, 2004. Pro Tools releases the 192 HD interface, offering up to 12 tracks at 192 24-bit. This was a huge deal at the time. Native Instruments releases Complete 2 with a whopping 15 gigabytes of samples and synths. Logic, which is now owned by Apple, offers a complete set of eMagic virtual instruments, which was also a big deal as a single package DAW that allowed you to do sequencing with native virtual instruments. The IRAA reports 12.1 billion in revenue based on 98% physical sales and 2% digital downloads. MySpace is founded. Digital track sales are reported to Nielsen SoundScan for the first time. MySpace is founded in August of 2003, which will become the driving force behind music discovery within a couple years. And Facebook is founded as a private college network at Harvard in February of 2004. Los Angeles. I love this quote by Frank Lloyd Wright, because it really kind of encapsulates for me what my experience in Los Angeles was. It was such a magnet for people from everywhere. At the time, it was a place where you could go, and even if you were not terribly skilled or anything else, you could get a gig in the entertainment industry and work your way up. And that just leads to a lot of sort of just interesting weirdos who I ran into in my time in Los Angeles. All right, so in the fall of my senior year, I interned at a local advertising house where I made my first contacts in LA through the staff, who was incredibly generous. Those connections helped me line up some interviews in the spring, and then I booked a trip to LA to do some interviews, which led to an offer to work at a dub house where I started working the summer after graduation. For those of you who don't know what a dub house is, it is short for a duplication house for physical media. It was dry, repetitive, but a technical job that paid enough that I could afford a place in West LA with roommates. So while I had a foothold, I didn't really want to be doing that job. So I kept networking and landed 2 weekend shifts at Sound Chamber Mastering, which was an audio house that was specializing in audio remastering for film and television. This was the start of the DVD boom around 2005, 2006, where studios were remastering their catalogs and releasing every kind of special edition and reissue. So they were monetizing their back catalog with new physical media that they could sell, yada, 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 revenue, revenue, revenue. So I quickly noticed that I was making more from my two 12-hour shifts at Sound Chamber than I was in a 40-hour week working at the dub house. So I did what any sane person would do, and I quit the 40-hour a week job, and I worked 24 hours a week. At Sound Chamber, they had landed the MGM home video account, which included the James Bond films. So my first experience in audio post was QCing and doing laybacks of foreign dubs of James Bond films. So basically recording remastered audio soundtracks to physical tapes to act as masters for duplication facilities like the one that I had just quit. So within a couple months, I was pulled aside at Sound Chamber and was told, hey, we're running out of work and you should start looking for a new gig. Now, the reason for this was that Sony had purchased the rights to the MGM home video entertainment catalog, and they were bringing all of their post operations in-house to their facility in Culver City. This was not the last time that a corporate deal would disrupt my work situation. And something that whenever you go out into the world, you should keep in mind that this is always a possibility, and is just sort of a weird sort of reality that if you are working in entertainment, that also means that you are working in corporate America, no matter how creative your job is. Um, so I needed another job fast. I reconnected with Jim Allen, who had recently founded Post Haste Sound. I had spoken with Jim when I was setting up my move to Los Angeles. Um, but at that time, there wasn't really a place for me at Post Haste. But Post Haste was doing almost identical work to what I was doing at Sound Chamber. And when I reached back out to him, they were growing fast enough that after a trial period, I was offered a staff mixing position. So I settled in at Post Haste, started playing in bands, writing and recording on weekends and evening, meeting fellow musicians and filmmakers. And because I had access to the studio at Post Haste, I started getting asked to do film sound for no budget short films, right? So I would agree to do them on the condition that I was also allowed to score them. I did, I don't know, half a dozen or so of these, none of which have survived, with the exception of Kern Saxton's Dead or Living Through Chemistry, which lives on DVD or on the DVD of George A. Romero's Diary of the Dead and probably somewhere on YouTube, I would imagine. And I mentioned Kern because he would later hire me to write the score for my first feature, his film Sushi Girl. And he later introduced me to writer-director Zach Clark that I made 4 feature films with. All right, so after 5 years, I was beginning to feel like I was ready for something new. When I started at Post Haste, it was a brand new company. It was basically in startup mode. Um, and that was an incredible opportunity because I was given a lot of work that I had to learn really quickly, and I got to help sort of design the production process. I collaborated with Jim and with our lead mixer, Randall Smith, and it was all very exciting. But within 5 years, it had become a little bit rote. When you're doing audio post production, there's a point at which you kind of know what the deal is and you're doing the thing. And it occurred to me that audio post production was not what I set out to do, and I was really hoping to be doing more music focused work. So in July of 2009, I got a call from my classmate Brian, who I just mentioned, who, rather than go out into the world and start working right away, had gone to grad school at Yale, had settled in New York, and was very well aware that I was kind of ready to leave LA. And the news that he shared with me was that there was a part-time position in Philip Glass's office, and if he wanted, he would put me in touch with the people in Philip's office. So as an aside, Philip's opera Einstein on the Beach was one of my aha moments as a young composer. So as a teenager, my sister had the CD of Einstein released by Sony, and it was something that I just was kind of digging through her stuff as little brothers do, put it on, and I was like, holy shit, what is this? So I was ecstatic at even just the prospect of talking to someone who worked with Philip. So I interviewed with Jim Keller, Philip's manager, which went very well. And what Jim told me was, don't move here for this job, but if you moved here or if you lived here, you could have this job. So with that information, I put in my 2 weeks notice at Post Haste, packed up my life, and arrived in New York August 1st of 2009. So what happened in 2009? Sibelius announces magnetic layout. For the composers who are listening or in the audience, you know why this is important, and I will not elaborate any further. Logic 9 is released with a complete suite of plugins and virtual instruments. Native Instruments Complete 6 is released with 65 gigs of System virtual instruments and samples. The IRAA reports 7.7 billion in revenue. I will point out that we are now at half of where we were in 1999. So within 10 years, the reported revenue by the recording industry or the Recording Industry Association of America has halved. That breaks down into 41% digital format, and 2/3 of those or of that revenue is from downloads. MySpace is now owned by News Corp, the same company that owns Fox Film Studio, and later that year is overtaken by Facebook as the largest social network. New York. So this quote by the writer Poe Bronson was on a Starbucks cup on my last day at Post Haste. The director of operations and I had a thing that we would do after lunch. We'd walk to the Starbucks down the street, get a coffee, and our way of kind of sending me off was to do that one more time. And I noticed this quote, and it's something that I would recommend that you take to heart and keep in mind. Golden handcuffs are a real thing. You can have a job or you can be pursuing something that satisfies all of your material needs, but it isn't what you want to be doing. And if you're going to have a creative career, you are going to constantly be navigating this trade-off. The trade-off between I need to make money and also my heart's desire and what I need to be doing as a person who exists on this earth is creating things. So again, I will not go any further on that in fear of ruining it, but something else to file away for later. So, Dunvagen Music Publishers was founded in 1977 by Philip Glass to look after his publishing interests and manage his career. Dunvagen's sister company, St. Rose Music Publishers, was founded by Philip and his manager, Jim Keller, as a way to look after the publishing interests of Philip and Jim's colleagues who had music or material that didn't fit neatly into a box. So when I started working at in the Dunvagen offices, I met composer Nico Muhly, who had very recently been signed to a publishing deal around the time I started working there. So Nico's career was exploding in 2009. His second album had just come out, Mother Tongue. His score for Best Picture winner, The Reader, was getting a ton of attention, and he was getting a lot more film work, to say nothing of his commissions. I think that he got his first Met commission that year. So he was in and out of the office a lot, just printing out scores or printing parts or, doing composerly things. And he seemed like he was really busy and I needed more freelance work. So at one point I pulled him, was just like, hey man, if you need help with anything, like I'm very, very happy to, just do admin work or whatever for you. So Nico invited me to lunch and we figured out some things that I could work on. And near the end of that conversation, he very pointedly asked me what I really wanted to be doing. So I told him that I was a recording engineer and I would love to record and mix anything that he was working on. And he immediately agreed to it. So that short conversation led to one of the longest collaborations of my professional career. We've been working together now for 16 years. We've done over 25 media and recording projects. I mentioned this to him the other day and we both kind of blankly stared at each other and we were like, we don't actually know the number because there are a lot of things that we worked on that like there's, there isn't just like a neat list of it. So this is a smattering of things that we could remember. Anyway, so from 2009 to 2021, my career was anchored by Dunvagen and St. Rose Music. Everything that I was working on kind of came back there. It was an unbelievable way to expand my network, to really embed myself in the music production scene as well as the new music scene in New York City. So I was brought on to help with the publishing side of the business. And I very much learned as I went. It was a lot of reading contracts and pulling files. Jim would often say to me, if I didn't have anything to do, find a project of Philip's that I thought was cool and read the contract. So by 2016, Zoe Knight, who had been working at Dunvagen before me, was tapped to run the newly expanded St. Rose Management and Publishing, which handled Nico and a bunch of other composers. And I became the day-to-day manager for 4 composers, as well as handling licensing for the Ravi Shankar estate and the operas of Tom Waits. So when I had initially decided to take the job at Dunvagen, I really thought of it as my grad school. I never had any intention to go to grad school. It didn't feel like it was a fit for me. So I imagined that this would last for a couple years, and it ended up lasting 11. And during that time, I learned the publishing business. I learned how to manage artists, and I was embedded in Philip's machine. So I was working with a lot of really cool artists, a lot of really inspiring artists, and got a front row seat to how a lot of, records were made by people who made records that, had a huge impact on me. A great example, Michael Reisman, who has been a member of the Philip Glass Ensemble and the music director for Philip since the 70s. He produced that recording of Einstein on the Beach that really reached me when I was a teenager. So all of a sudden I was, talking and working with this guy who literally, made me want, he made the recording that really made me decide that I wanted to become a composer. I mean, with all due respect to Philip, but like, that record sounds incredible. If you haven't heard it, go listen to the Sony recording. It's wonderful. So I began integrating all of this new information and experience into my practice as a composer and engineer. I started expanding my own studio. I started, buying pieces of gear, buying virtual instrument libraries based on what I learned from the productions that I was working on and how the composers that I was working for were doing that work. My personal output during this time included 13 feature films, a song cycle, a one-act musical, 9 seasons of podcasts, and a bunch of ads. And the sum of that work combined with my experience at Dunvagen and St. Rose led me to going independent in 2021. So what happened in 2021? The IRAA reports music revenue of $15 billion, which in theory is a new record, but adjusted for inflation is not the same amount of money as the record that was set in 1999. So we're still not at parity to where we were in 1999. Streaming accounts now account for 83% of recorded music revenue. TikTok revenue was reported to the IRAA for the first time. Apple Music announced spatial audio with Dolby Atmos and lossless audio. Native Instruments releases Complete 13 Ultimate with 850 gigabytes of synthesizers, virtual instruments, and samples. So, Past Future is my current company, and this quote from Philip is from his memoir, Words Without Music. I was working in Philip's office when he was writing this. If you have not read it, I highly recommend it if you are interested in how to have a creative life. The thing that is really inspiring about Philip is when you look at his trajectory from the 1960s through today, he is someone who was told no very flatly from the beginning, and the way that he responded to that was to start his own band and to produce his own records until people got it. And as an unbelievably prolific musician, this is it. This is the secret. This is all you need to do, is get up every day and do the work. I founded Past Future in 2021, and I went out on my own with 3 full-time management clients and a long list of people to call. So my production work continued without really missing a beat, and I found myself in the exciting position of carving out a new professional niche. For months, I emailed and called and had coffee with everyone in my network, and anybody who was recommended by a colleague, I got in touch with, had coffee, and talked to them. So near the top of that list were Pat Dillett and Steve Sellett, who are the co-founders of Reservoir Studios. Pat is a 4-time Grammy winner. Steve is an amazing singer-songwriter and proprietor of not only Reservoir, but also Saltlands, which encompasses the entire basement of 68 J Street in Dumbo, Brooklyn. So Steve is what I like to call the great connector of people in the New York music scene, because Saltlands is a complex of a bunch of rooms that are very similar to the one that I'm in right now, which, was kind of a brilliant thing that he anticipated, that as production became more of an individual sort of thing that people were producing, didn't need large facilities for things. He sort of put together Saltlands, which was a mix of sort of private studios about this size, as well as rehearsal spaces for bands. So Reservoir Studios is where Nico and I had been recording his projects since 2016. And the gist of my meeting with Steve and Pat was, I don't know how, but I want to figure out a way to work with you guys. And a few weeks later, Steve called me up, which led to us revamping his record label called Historical Fiction Records, which I'm now a partner of. And soon after led to me taking a studio at Reservoir, which is the room that I am in right now. So since 2021, my career has been a mix of artist management, creative producing, engineering, and composing. This mix of disciplines all work together and support one another that allow me to do really artistically satisfying work with artists that I admire. And what's been really great about it is that as I have sort of expanded the company and expanded who I'm working with, it's been something that has allowed me to expand my own community and create a career that I really feel like works for me. And I think that that is something that's not for everybody, but if you have the inclination, giving yourself your own job is kind of the ideal thing that you can do if you want to have a creative career. Don't wait for someone to give you permission. Don't, wait for someone to bop you on the head and be like, here's this great job. Figure it out. Find a way. Be entrepreneurial. All right, so that brings us to today, 2025, but I don't have any statistics for 2025, but I do have statistics for 2024. So at the very top of this list, the IRAA reports 17.7 billion in revenue, 84% from streaming, and an actual new all-time high. Streaming subscriptions cross 100 million paid users. There is a 31% increase year over year in downloads of Dolby Atmos compatible plugins. Sphere Entertainment announces the expansion of HoloPlot immersive audio to their other MSG properties, starting with Radio City Music Hall. And finally, vinyl sales reach 1.4 billion, marking the 18th consecutive year of growth and the highest revenue since 1984. So what is the point of all of these factoids? When I was preparing this seminar, I realized that I wasn't talking very much about music. But a lot of what I was thinking about and what I was, kind of putting together was about shifting technologies and the mechanisms we use to monetize music. Why is this? And, why am I talking about monetizing music rather than talking about music? Music is way more interesting. Well, because music remains a constant. Among all of these shifting realities, music is the same. Through the 20-ish years I've covered, nothing has really changed about music, just how it's packaged, distributed, and paid for. So I mentioned the Anthropocene at the beginning of this lecture because it provides a framework to track the rapid technological advances that birth the modern music industry. So that may sound crazy, but let's travel back in time to 1760. Advances in the printing press led to a publishing boom, which began to shift the paradigm of how composers could make their living. In the United States in the 1860s, advancements in piano manufacturing lowered the cost of a piano, which led to Americans buying piano for their homes, which led to another sheet music boom of popular song folios, so Stephen Foster and stuff like that, that wouldn't start to slow down until well into the 20th century. Now, when I say well into the 20th century, what I'm referring to is the advent of sound recording and broadcasting, which created new revenue streams for musicians and that were opened up, as well as whole new industries for electrical engineers and scientists that would eventually split off into their own disciplines of audio engineering and acoustics. The recording boom from 1950 to 2000 generated more money than anybody ever possibly imagined that a musician could make. And from that, it accelerated recording and distribution technologies. In the 21st in the 21st century, distribution has advanced to the point that we have what amounts to the entire history of recorded music available on demand. So with each of these advancements, jobs were created and jobs were diminished or passed into obscurity. Having a job in the music business has always been a moving target. Bach, who passed in 1750, worked under the patronage system, right? So you needed to have the church or you needed a wealthy patron to even begin to think about it. And basically, you were just like, you were the equivalent of their jukebox. We're having a big party, so would you please write me something? Sure thing. By the 1790s, the publishing advances, and specifically with the printing press and scores being able to be sold, created a new paradigm for composers where they could support themselves through commission, through publishing rights, and through public performances. So when we talk about the future of music, what we're really talking about is the future of the monetization of music. Music hasn't changed. It's evolved in practice, but ultimately music continues to be a mysterious and immutable part of the human experience. Music is so fundamentally important that it survived the development of language, which is a technology. So all of this, kind of probably begs the question, what should I do about my career? And the honest answer to that is there is no answer, and it really depends on what you want to do, how you want to have a creative life, what is the way that you find that is the way that you want to live. You can be a touring musician, you can be a studio engineer, you can, work in a million different disciplines. But what I will share with you are 9 things that I think help me build my career and may help you. So first, work with your friends. Everybody who you know in your undergrad will be with you throughout your career, provided that you maintain those relationships, that you continue to develop them. Second, expand your network, meet people, go to concerts, go to spaces that you're not comfortable in, meet people, support your colleagues, make sure that, people know that you are someone who, if they need an answer or, they need to run something by someone, make that person you. Learn new technologies and ignore the ones that don't serve you. Especially now, there is so much marketing going on specifically for plugins and for the newest technologies and whatever. You probably don't need 99% of them. Learn how to filter and learn how to develop your practice, especially if you are an engineer, especially if you are working on the recorded music side of things. Find the tools that work for you and hone those things and use a really, really, really specific filter that allows you to put together a studio and a list of tools that allow you to do great work and to repeat that. Don't compare yourself to others. Run your own race. Identify what's important to you and leave room for that to change. Seek out people you admire and learn from them. This is a big one. Call people, email people. This is way, 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 way easier than when I was at Carnegie Mellon. Be on the lookout for unexpected opportunities and don't be afraid to take them. And finally, be a resource to your community. Everything that we do related to music as engineers, as artists, as performers, anything, even as executives, community is everything. There is no other way for us to do this without, all of the other people, the hundreds, the thousands of people who, do one small little thing that add up to a giant whole. Your holistic community is everything. And that is all that I have to say about that. So if you all have any questions or would like to dive any deeper on anything, I am very happy to chat with y'all.
Okay, I'll start. This is Nick.
Hey, Nick.
That was a fascinating career travelogue. That was amazing.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you.
In fact, I think you should take those 9 things and make them the chapter of your future book.
All right, I'll write those down.
I'm serious. Anyway, that's a thought. But my
Thank you.
question is, how did you handle the business side of yourself, I guess, as you traverse through all these different things? Did you have agents or did you have somebody farm it or did you do it all your own?
I did it all myself. So when I moved to, so I can't stress enough like what leaving Post Haste really was in terms of the leap of faith. Post Haste was a salaried job with paid overtime, profit sharing, 401k match, 3 weeks off a year. I lived in Santa Monica. The studio was 10 minutes away. I went boogie boarding at sunset. Like I could have thrown that into cruise control and just, gone for it. When I arrived in New York City, I became a freelancer and so on the business side of things, I was a freelancer. I, basically on paper made like $25,000 a year because I expensed everything, and that's how kind of like I made it work. And then in terms of the I guess what you might have been referring to more specifically in terms of the business side, I mean, Jim Keller, who is Philip's manager, mentored me in a way that I absolutely cannot, you know, speak highly enough of. I when I did my first feature film, Philip's lawyer did that for me. I put it in front of Jim, and Jim said, "I'm not a lawyer. Give it to Tim." And Tim O'Donnell, Philip's lawyer, who's an unbelievable character that someday, if you guys ever want to, buy me dinner, I will tell you Tim O'Donnell isms. But all of the music business stuff during that period, without actually being a client, I had basically Philip's team that I could throw a contract in front of, and they would tell me what to do.
And the reason I ask is many musicians, if you listen to some of their bios or listen to their podcasts and things, got ripped off along the way. I mean, Billy Joel was the Beatles lost their music. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why I asked the question, and you answered it very well. I guess the lawyer probably sounded like it was value added in that case.
Yeah, I mean, very much so. I mean, it's the, I've seen enough contracts at this point that, I mean, another thing that I really highly recommend is learn how music publishing work and learn how copyright works. Because, the industry is very different now because everybody knows exactly what you're alluding to, is that anybody who will, break off a bigger chunk for themselves will. So a lot of deals, I mean, particularly because the record industry has changed so much, the deals are just very different. But the way to protect yourself is to educate yourself. You can read a book on music publishing that'll take you, whatever, depending on how fast you read, 3 hours. And that will give you a baseline for, well, what is the publishing side? What is the master side? What are grand rights? What are mechanical rights? What are small rights? What are, um, you know, uh, mechanical rights as they relate to streaming? So all of this stuff is like very knowable and very accessible in this day and age.
Okay, thank you. That was an excellent presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Fritz, I know over the years when we had, let's say, the top 1% of Carnegie Mellon students in my area kind of here and related to our studio that were moving to New York, I would give them your name as a contact. And with all the things that you're going through and trying to build your own career, you always had time to spend with them.
Yeah. I mean, that's because I mean as I kind of alluded to in my talk, I'm a huge believer in community, and I am a huge advocate for community. And also, you know, the entertainment business is kind of terrifying because it's completely opaque. When you think about, going into a creative life, you get the same sort of answer that I gave before I shared those nine ideas, is that I have no idea how you can have a career. But if you tell me what your values are, if you tell me what you want to be doing, I can maybe point you in a direction. And I'm always very happy to do that. And again, I strongly recommend that you all kind of adopt the same sort of attitude and just help each other.
So did you at some point do something with the Rogers McFeely Foundation?
Oh yeah, so another one of the projects that I did when I was at Post Haste, where there was no money, um, but I produced the soundtrack for, was so Paul Germain, who actually was a graduate student at Carnegie Mellon before he moved out to LA. He made a documentary about Mr. McFeely. God, I can't believe his name is on the tip of my tongue. This is super embarrassing. David Newell. There it is. So a documentary about David Newell, who played Mr. McFeely on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And I produced the soundtrack, and I did all of the score mixing, or I did all of the film sound for it. So that was a project that I had the facility at Post Haste. Paul and I had been connected actually again through Brian Senti, and that's how I got involved with that project.
And that was a Pittsburgh connection.
Very much so, yeah. And we had the premiere at the Regent Theater, and I got to sit in Fred Rogers' office not long after he passed away, and I held the puppets from the show, and it was really cool.
So do you remember when we visited the studio of Liz Berlin when they were just putting that together?
Oh, yeah.
And there was a little kid in a playpen who was Mr. Small.
Liz's kid, yeah.
Well, he graduated from Carnegie Mellon, I think last year or the year before.
Oh my God.
Yep.
That's so great.
And Liz Berlin and I are friends now.
Oh, wonderful. No, my another classmate of, do you remember Claire Drobot?
Who was it again?
Claire Drobot. She was a year behind me, but she's still a dear friend of mine. She now runs City Theater, and she sent me a picture from their gala, and it was Claire and Liz.
And were you an intern with me at my studio at home?
Oh, I worked for you for like 3 years. I subbed for you mixing Pittsburgh opera for WQED one night.
Yes, you did. And we did radio shows, remember?
Yep, international music from Carnegie Mellon.
We did, yep, for several years. All right, any other questions? Come on.
Looks like there's one in the back.
Hi, Fritz. My name is Bruno. Thank you so much for your presentation. I just find that your work is so inspiring, and the fact that you traverse the industry to find the spot where you looks like where you want to be at is beautiful. Can you explain like how much of your current work is attributed to composing? How much, like just like rough percentage wise, is it mostly all composing, or what else?
I'd say that it's probably like, oh geez, percentages. How do they work? Yeah, I mean, like composing wise, I'd say that it's like 25%.
Okay.
So like this year I did a podcast for the New York Times. I'm in pre-production for a film score that like I'll see what like where at the beginning of it we'll see if that actually is a project for this year. I'm finishing up an EP of songs. And then, the rest is a mix of just production work and management stuff. And the management stuff I would say right now is probably about 50% of what I'm doing, and production is 25%. It looks like Rowan Clark's hand is up.
Hi. Yeah.
Hello.
So thank you so much for your presentation. It was really cool. My question is, I guess I'm a freshman, and I don't really know what I want to do in music technology yet, but like, what would you recommend for figuring out what you want to pursue? Because I'm like looking at like internships and like obviously freshman, but like what do I look for? I don't know.
Um, so find out what's important to you. Because that's kind of it. Like for me, recording was something that was, it was so exciting to me that like it's all like it was just like it was just the coolest thing that I could think of doing, and it's something that like I just really, 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 really wanted it. And so, the part of that was an outgrowth. So my freshman year, I wrote a piece for the composers concert. And the way that it worked back then is that like, this was a student organized thing. And so you would write a piece and you would find students who would perform it. And for whatever reason, this happened on homecoming weekend. And the one of the performers um, what gave, let's call it, an unsuccessful performance. Um, and so that got me really interested in recording, not just because it was exciting to me, but also as a means to control the way that my music was presented. So this was around a time that I was also like getting into Eno and a lot of different kinds of electronic music. And so for me, it was very much like I had this sort of singular goal of wanting to have a creative life in music, and starting from composition and then being inspired by recording and then realizing that I could fuse the two. That was the guiding light for me in terms of what I just went after. That was the direction that I went in.
Thank you.
Hmm. Patrick.
Hello, Fritz. I'm Patrick, and it was very inspiring presentations for me because I'm a high school senior, so figuring out music as my biggest passion, it's really inspiring to see someone showing us how a music career looks like. And like for me, I often think about what I want to study at university, or obviously I want to spend a lot of my life in music because that's my biggest passion. So my question, because you've been a New Yorker for 15 years now, 16, how it's a bit general, but how does a week in your life look like? How do you spend your day in general, working as an independent musician or producer, let's say?
Yeah, so I live on the Upper West Side on 69th Street. My studio where I am now is on 37th Street. So I live in Manhattan. Um, an average day for me is, up at 6:30 or 7, um, kind of morning ritual, and then emails. Then I ride my bike to the studio, so get here around 9:30 or 10. Then usually emails and meetings and stuff like that until noon. In the afternoon, it's usually a mix of production work and composing and any meetings that I couldn't fit into the morning. And then depending on how the evening goes, a lot of times I'm going to concerts, or I'm going to, things related to clients, or I'm just going out to, you know, see ensembles or bands, or, musical events that I think are interesting. Or, I mean, my girlfriend is back in school right now. So, if she has the night off, we have dinner. Um, but yeah, it's a pretty like it's that. So it's kind of taking the things that I mentioned and maybe like moving them around, but that's an average day.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, this summer was my first time in New York, and I was like really obviously before that I was seeing reading all about New York on the internet, on books, like the music culture and everything, but I got to see it in person. So, like, do you generally have time to, like, I don't know, jam in bars or like at night to, just do music stuff, performing? I don't know.
Usually when I perform, it's because someone has bribed me to do so. Um, I mean, there are tons of opportunities. Like the reason that New York is great is because there is just sort of like the seemingly infinite number of venues and musicians. But for me, I made a decision at some point that I wasn't going to pursue performance as a large part of what I do. And that was because there was a point at which I realized that it didn't make me happy. It's something that just didn't feel like the right thing. But yeah, I mean, in terms of just like a music city, it's hard to do better.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course.
So Fritz, a couple of things that we mentioned before the seminar began.
Yeah.
One, you said something about techniques of using microphones.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I got a kick out of that because other people have told me that too, that the minimalist approach that I take to miking things can be helpful.
Yeah. So Ricardo, we were reminiscing a little bit before everybody got here, and he said that he remembered the crestfallen look on my face when I realized that the recording studio was that little room off of ACH. And the thing that is funny about that is what I learned in those sort of, when I was first being trained, when I learned the minimalist classical techniques from Ricardo, that's stuff that I still use absolutely to this day. And it's something that, every great engineer that I have come across, the recurring theme is that simpler is better. So, with Ricardo, it was the ORTF stereo recording techniques with spot mics. Like, it's really difficult to it was difficult to improve upon that in a lot of ways, because it, like, the fundamental roadblock that people run into is that they've seen pictures of recording setups that had a million microphones, but they don't know what a phase relationship is. So yeah, I mean, that was totally formative for me. And it's really interesting. So Pat Dillett, who I mentioned, who's one of the proprietors of Reservoir, being the nosy person that I am, I've gone into his room when he's working on mixes. So to give you an idea of Pat's sort of clientele, he mixed the last two Paul Simon records. Like he's like a sort of absolute top of the heap mixer. And whenever I go into his room, chat with him, whatever, I'm checking out what his sessions look like, and there's like almost nothing on his inserts. And his whole thing is that when he gets, a lot of times when he gets a record from bands, it's a Pro Tools session and everything has like 18 inserts on everything. And the first thing that he does is just turn everything off.
Any other questions? Well, Fritz, I really appreciate that you could do this for us, and it was really terrific. So thank you so much, and we're going to do this again at some point.
Great, love it. Oh, Rowan, do you have a question? Oh no, that's applause. Never mind. Thanks everybody. This is really fun. And feel free to reach out to me. However, find me on socials. And if you have more questions, get at me there.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks all.